Omega Red debuted on the comic book scene in the early 1990s on the pages of Jim Lee's new adjectiveless X-Men title. While his first appearance is considered to be issue 4 of the 1991 X-Men series, he was shown in issue 1 on a splash page in the back teasing things to come. Speaking of things to come, today we're talking all about Omega Red, so let's get to it. First, thanks for watching JL's Comics. If you do like the video, hit the thumbs up and subscribe. Arkady Rossovich was born in the USSR of bleak Russia, under the thumb of a strict Soviet regime. Even as a young boy, Arkady was a serial killer. His brother, Vasily, who would grow up to be the director of the Soviet inter-shield called Sickle, discovered what he was doing and told on him. So he left his family and he joined the Russian army in the GRU's Spetsnaz, where he was stationed in the frozen tundra of Siberia. In Siberia, Arkady was kidnapping and killing young girls, and because the village was so small, his crimes were easily traced back to him. And so he was turned in by his fellow soldiers and was taken aside to be put down. But a bullet to the back of his head didn't kill him. And so his superiors recommended him to the Soviet Super Soldier program. They wanted to create their own super weapon, a mirror to the US and Canada's Weapon X and Weapons Plus programs. But he escaped from this too and headed across the Berlin Wall into Western Europe, where he continued to kill. That's when he came onto the radar of a powerful mutant named Magneto. Interpol had been tracking Rossovich across Europe, but were forced to back off after pressure from the KGB. An Irish mutant named Banshee, and also at the time an Interpol agent, went dark and continued to hunt down Omega Red. Outside of Interpol, Magneto assisted Banshee in his hunt, wanting to put down the killer permanently. Omega Red wanted Sean to kill him before he'd go back to the KGB. However, Sean was able to track him down, capture him, and turn him over to authorities, which ended up being KGB in disguise, and so they took Arkady and forced him back into the Soviet Super Soldier program. In trying to emulate what Weapon X did with Wolverine, the Russian scientists first needed a metal alloy, and in trying to replicate adamantium, they created a radioactive alloy they named carbonadium. Instead of retractable claws, they used a carbonadium synthesizer to give Arkady retractable carbonadium tentacles. The carbonadium synthesizer made the alloy malleable, and so they could form it and shape it easier, and it also counteracted the radiation emanating from the metal. His tentacles were deadly metal appendages that could be used as weapons like whips, but he was also able to wrap them around his victims and drain the life force from their bodies. Implanting the carbonadium alloy in his body was constantly killing Arkady when he didn't have the carbonadium synthesizer in his possession, and he needed to drain life force from others in order to replenish his own to stay alive. Kill or be killed, in other words. In these early days, Wolverine, Wraith, Sabretooth, and Maverick were operating as Team X, working with the CIA and part of the Weapon X program, and they stole the carbonadium synthesizer while on a mission to rescue a CIA double agent named Janus Hollenbeck. Hollenbeck was killed by Sabretooth, and as the team fled the scene in a jeep, Wraith fired a shoulder-launched grenade at Omega Red, and it hit him center mass, but there was no effect on the living weapon, and he coiled up Wraith, but Wraith ended up disappearing. Then Wolverine hid the synthesizer in Hollenbeck's coffin. In the years that followed, Omega Red became too unpredictable, too uncontrollable, and so the KGB put him in a cryogenic chamber for suspended animation, and there, for many years, he remained. As the Soviet Union collapsed and the KGB dissolved and reformed as FSB, the ninja clan, the Hand, broke into the old KGB facilities and freed Omega Red, still in stasis in his frozen prison. At this time, the Hand were led by a guy named Matsuo Tsurayaba, the same guy who switched Quanon and Betsy Braddock as Psylocke for all those years. So they brought Omega Red to a remote island in the South Pacific and sacrificed 20 men in order for his mutant death factor to suck their life force away and give Omega Red new life. That's when Omega Red went after Wolverine, who now worked with Professor X's X-Men. On the cover of X-Men issue 5, the two fought with fury and rage, claws and tendrils intertwined as the two were locked in combat. Omega Red was able to defeat Wolverine, nearly killing him before Matsuo told him to terminate his attack. Red brought Logan back to Matsuo and Fenris, the Strucker twins. Matsuo also had his new associate, a former Weapon X scientist named Dr. Abraham Cornelius, probe Wolverine's body to find out what he knew about the carbonadium synthesizer, and that's how they learned that Wolverine had hidden it in Hollenbeck's casket. Meanwhile, a former Team X agent named Maverick was also hired by a Canadian liaison to Team X to stop Omega Red from getting his hands on the synthesizer. So he tracked them to where Wolverine was captive and freed him, and Wolverine fought Omega Red again, escaping the facility. The rest of his X-Men strike team showed up to help, and that's when Omega Red attacked them too, punching Beast out and then wrapping Cyclops in his tendrils, threatening to kill him with his death factor, and that he could also release lethal pheromones in the air, which he'd killed Jubilee with. He told her, "The sicker you get, the better I feel." Maverick took the nearly dead Wolverine to a safe area nearby and injected him with massive doses of neuroepinephrine to wake him up. In another location, Matsuo had the rest of the X-Men team captive, and he brought in Sabretooth to help Omega Red find Wolverine. and Sabretooth picked up on Red's scent but couldn't place it from back in the Team X days. Dr. Cornelius and Omega Red watched on a monitor while Sabretooth, with Psylocke in tow, defeated Maverick and Wolverine. Matsuo reminded Red that until he had the C-Synth, he was still dependent on the life force of others and encouraged Red to drain their X-Men prisoners. Matsuo told Omega Red that he couldn't mass-produce Logan's healing factor. He had failed, and his only chance would be getting their prisoner Wolverine to reveal where he'd hidden the C-Synth 30 years ago. And as Dr. Cornelius gave the order to kill Wolverine, Psylocke attacked Matsuo and Omega Red, saying she was faking obedience while gathering intel, waiting for her moment to strike. She sliced Omega Red's face with her twin katanas. She'd used her psionic powers to trick Omega Red, then lunged again, piercing his left lung with her blades. She then shoved her psionic knife through Fenris' sister's face and told everyone, Omega Red included, to stand down and surrender. Wolverine broke out of containment and attacked Omega Red. Wolverine's X-Men team, now free, also showed up to fight. Rogue used her formidable strength to pound Omega Red into the ground, and they all escaped as the lair exploded in a massive fireball above the skyline of the German city of Berlin. Matsuo went to recover the C-Synth device from Hollenbeck's casket, but Wolverine and Maverick appeared, killing him and his hand foot soldiers. Wolverine then gave Maverick the C-Synth to keep safely in his custody. Omega Red went back to the X-Men title, now fighting with a vampire named Soul Skinner in a remote Siberian village. Soul Skinner defeated Omega Red and took over his mind. The X-Men detected the mutant activity from their fight and showed up to investigate. Soul Skinner used Omega Red to fight with the X-Men, and he quickly captured Jubilee in his deadly coils. Wolverine was enraged and attacked Omega Red in a berserker fury. Cyclops yelled for Wolverine to stop, that Red was being controlled, but Logan said, "For Janus, for everything you've done to me and mine, you're gonna die." Psylocke tried to stop Omega Red too by knifing his brain, but it didn't work. He shot his death spores at Iceman, who also collapsed to the ground. Soul Skinner sent Omega Red to hunt down and stop Colossus from finding them, but when Soul Skinner died, Omega Red fled and escaped. Omega Red stayed in Siberia, however, and instead started hunting down Olenka Barankova, whom he quickly learned defected from Russia to the evil organization AIM, and there she became a female MODOK called Modom, and she and AIM were buying nuclear material. AIM shipped their nuclear material and equipment to the evil island of Boca Caliente, so Iron Man and Omega Red both converged on the island. Modom almost killed Iron Man just as Omega Red showed up to fight the big female head, and with Iron Man passed out on the ground, Omega Red and Modom fought. He started sucking Modom's life with his death factor, but she rocketed away in her chair at the last minute. Iron Man regained consciousness and spoke with Omega Red. "Whatever's between you and Modom isn't my problem," he told Red as the Russian killer ran after Modom, and he found the lady and started ripping her apart, but then Iron Man showed up again, knocking Omega Red away from Modom with his repulsor blasts. That's when Red and Iron Man battled. Red wrapped his coils around Stark's metal armor and pierced his chest plating, but then Tony released 50,000 volts of electricity, which knocked him down. Tony then used Red's own coils to whip him around, smashing him into rocks and trees. And with Modom and Omega Red down, AIM agents showed up on the battleground, and Tony turned them both over to AIM. Red then showed up on the cover of Cable issue 9 with Nathan Summers succumbing dramatically to Omega Red's coils. He was now in London, England, in the sewers beneath the city fighting with Magneto's acolytes. They offered him a way to slow the death spore virus in his body to free him of the need to replenish his life force with the life of others. And he was intrigued. He needed to collect and assemble multiple items together for this procedure to happen. So he showed up at Moira McTaggart's lab on Muir Island, where she was testing Cable's body and the technorganic virus. Omega Red beat the crap out of Cable and then stole a vial containing a biocellular subcutaneous matrix stabilizer. Cable wasn't done. He rose up and battled Omega Red. It was metal arms versus metal tendrils. And Omega Red told him, "I am, therefore you are not. I smile, therefore you cringe. I live, therefore you die." Omega Red defeated Cable, but he saw within Cable a kindred spirit. Next, Omega Red attacked Dr. Lashniev at a space center in Russia, as he was the director of Project Epsilon, the project that was meant to bear Red's successor, Epsilon Red. Epsilon Red was the key to the next artifact that Omega Red needed to rid himself of his affliction. To not be killed, the director gave Omega Red a hard drive containing the information he wanted. The final step would be for Omega Red to attack the Arctic base of the Acolytes leader Magneto to try to get it into space to their Avalon sanctuary to conduct a procedure which could only be done safely in the vacuum of space. The reason for this is that the process would release the death spores from his body, and if it was done on Earth, it would spread everywhere, everyone would die. Cable and the the Acolytes went to the remote Arctic base, but Omega Red was already there. And the Acolytes, along with Colossus, double-crossed Cable. Omega Red wasn't able to get up to Avalon and set about doing the procedure on Earth, which would unleash his death spores across the entire planet. The Acolytes wanted to head back to Avalon while the death spores took out all life on Earth, but an Acolyte named Amelia was trying to stop Omega Red, and it was just the delay that Cable needed to show up to fight. Also, a one-armed Acolyte named Katu showed up to stop Omega Red, and Katu sacrificed himself as the two disappeared and imploded when Katu turned his power inward. Later, Daredevil was swinging over the city when Omega Red jumped out of a big attack helicopter. As Daredevil confronted him, Red wrapped Daredevil in his coils, draining his life force. Red's controller called him off before he could kill the costumed lawyer. Daredevil's Billy line tripped Omega Red and he fell out a window, and as they crashed into the street below, Black Widow appeared and shot Omega Red, but after slipping away, he went back on the hunt for Sabretooth, and in X-Factor issue 138, he got a rematch with Sabretooth. Russian soldiers from Project 13 found Omega Red hiding out in the Savage Land. They wanted his help in retrieving Nicholas, a deformed monster that escaped from their Project 13 research facility. Colossus, Nightcrawler, and Wolverine were there too, and that's when Wolverine ran into Omega Red once again. There were kids in Project 13 being used as experiments, and Omega Red grabbed a couple of them, wanting to kill them to steal their life force. The X-Men worked to free the kids while Omega Red confronted the Nicholas monster, and afterwards, again, Omega Red slipped away. He was then seen in the United States working as an enforcer and hitman for a drug dealer named the General. He went to a gentleman's club and killed another dealer named Nikolai Vernoff. He then teamed up with Lady Deathstrike to attack the X-Men, and their first target was Nightcrawler. They then went after Wolverine, who was this time working with Alpha Flight. Their next target was Wolverine's friend and sometimes lover Yukio and his foster daughter Amiko. Omega Red and Lady Deathstrike had been hired by Sabretooth to attack Wolverine's family and friends in exchange for access to some of the Weapon X files, including the Logan files. Omega Red and Lady Deathstrike paralyzed Yukio and carved a message into her back for Wolverine to find to meet them at the Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas. Wolverine had lost his mutant healing powers, but he went to confront them anyway, and he borrowed one of Guardian's Alpha Flight suits to mitigate the loss of his healing factor as best he could. And right there in the lobby of the Bellagio, the three fought. It was a flurry of claws, coils, blood, and death spores. Wolverine knew he was outmatched though and retreated, but Red and Lady D were right behind him, chasing him through a Cirque du Soleil show. Wolverine jumped out from under the bleachers and ripped Lady D's rebreather off her face and put it on himself. She succumbed to Red's death spores. The death spores, it turns out, are flammable, and so Wolverine ignited them as they clustered around Omega Red, allowing Wolverine to swing away to another floor for a moment of reprieve. But Omega Red caught up with Wolverine, picked him up, and threw him out a glass window, and he fell, crashing into a pool many floors below. Red and Lady D dragged Wolverine away, back to Sabretooth, who had Amiko prisoner. When Wolverine regained consciousness, he lunged at Sabretooth, but Omega Red smashed a champagne bottle over his head and wrapped Logan up tightly in his coils. Sabretooth hadn't paid Lady D or Red yet, nor had he given him the files he promised, and Sabretooth ended up double-crossing Omega Red and Lady D, saying that the reason he included Omega Red in the scheme is to screw him over one last time. Red shot his coils at Sabretooth as he teleported away with Wolverine and Amika barely missing him. Around this time, Omega Red had used his wealth and power and information to start his Red Mafia and was, of course, the Red Mafia Kingpin. The Weapon X director dispatched Agent Zero, who was Maverick, to hunt down Sabretooth and recover the stolen files. Omega Red met with Agent Zero over a lobster dinner and told him where Sabretooth was as revenge for his betrayal. When Wolverine got his memories back and he learned he had a killer son, he remembered Carbonadium was able to take him down when he was still a Weapon X experiment, so he went to Maverick at a facility run by Jubilee in Queens, New York for help. And as he got there, so too did Omega Red, also wanting the device. Wolverine was out yet another window and Omega Red captured Jubilee and left with her. Logan tracked the C-Synth to Berlin, Germany, where he learned it was now in the possession of Black Widow. She had a fake synth with her, and she told him the real one was in a safe deposit box in a bank in Brussels. Omega Red was also in Berlin, she said, and wanted the synth to make a pure alloy that he would then give to a Korean bioweapons firm in exchange for a cure. S.H.I.E.L.D. wanted Logan's location, but Natasha gave them Omega Red's location instead, and the two watched out a window as a missile strike followed by a rooftop assault by Dum-Dum and his S.H.I.E.L.D. agents ensued, all while knowing that Omega Red still had Jubilee hostage. Wolverine took the fake synthesizer to the roof to draw S.H.I.E.L.D. and Omega Red away from Jubilee, trying to save her even as she was being crushed to death under the rubble from the missile strike. Wolverine threw the synthesizer to Dum-Dum and Omega Red attacked S.H.I.E.L.D., which allowed Wolverine to go and rescue Jubilee. S.H.I.E.L.D. shot Omega Red with an immobilizing polygel, and he was now a S.H.I.E.L.D. prisoner. After Scarlet Witch whispered no more mutants on M-Day, Colossus, Nightcrawler, and Wolverine were captured and prisoners of the Red Room in Russia. The commander of the Red Room had put pressure on S.H.I.E.L.D. to return Omega Red to Russia, and so they had Omega Red there, where they were experimenting on him. The three X-Men escaped, so the commander set Omega Red loose to get them. What was the first thing Omega Red did? He killed the commander. Without hesitation, Wolverine attacked, clawing Red through his shoulder. Colossus' knuckle sandwich knocked Red to the ground, but Red used his coil to drain some life force from Colossus, recovering himself, and Wolverine attacked again, stabbing Omega Red in his forearm and in his stomach. Now bleeding out, yet still full of bloodlust, Red said, "I'm gonna eat your brains, Logan." And he was overpowering the two X-Men. However, Nightcrawler hadn't joined in yet. When he did jump into the fight, he teleported Omega Red into the sky and let him drop hundreds of feet to the ground, and when he crashed back to Earth, he was unconscious and beaten and covered in rubble. And while he was still out, S.H.I.E.L.D. showed up and recovered Omega Red. By the end of the Wolverine origin series, as Logan continued to hunt down Romulus in Russia, Omega Red was back in custody and happened to be at a nearby prison. Logan followed Romulus' trail to a prison where it turns out Logan was set up. It was a trap. Omega Red was free and killed everyone in the prison, so now he was super powered up. Omega Red defeated Wolverine in their battle, and he now had the Sea-Synth with him. Wolverine used a chain to drop a metal gate down on top of Omega Red, impaling him with the gate. Romulus and Wildchild captured Wolverine, but Omega Red was right behind them, crashing into the compound in pursuit. Omega Red and Wildchild fought, allowing Wolverine to escape. Red caught up with Wolverine, threatening to kill his son Daken, which is all the fire Wolverine needed to fight the evil mutant. So Wolverine threw and impaled Omega Red with the deadly Muramasa blade, an ancient, mystical, powerful sword that kills everything, and Omega Red collapsed to the floor, face first. He was dead. In Jason Aaron's 2010 Wolverine comic book, Wolverine was in hell and the devil sent everyone Wolverine had killed after him, including Omega Red. And then in Uncanny X-Force, a group named White Sky created a trio of Omega Red clones, Omega Black, Omega Red, and Omega White, who collectively became the Omega Clan. And the Omega Clan fought with the X-Force. Omega White was taken over by Shadow King. Much later, the Omega Clan was accepted to Krakoa with all the other mutants on Earth. Omega Red from the Omega Clan showed up in Deadpool's 2013 series, killing Roxxon agents as they lay waste to a Middle Eastern hamlet, although he told them to leave Deadpool for himself. The two battled in the desert as Wade called Red the Alabaster Bastard. Omega Red almost won the fight, but Paste Pop Pete showed up and squirted him with his paste. Roxxon tried to free Omega Red from the paste, but Deadpool blooped them with a grenade. And now free, Omega Red wrapped his coils around Deadpool's throat. The merc with a mouth gave himself a tracheotomy with a ballpoint pen. Roxxon picked up Omega Red in a jeep and he dragged Deadpool with one of his coils behind the truck as they headed back to their camp, where they chained Deadpool up. But to free himself, Deadpool ate through his own arm. One of the Roxxon agents asked Omega Red why Deadpool wanted the crates that they had, so he sliced the guy in half just for asking the question. The crate had a glass sarcophagus in it, and Red tracked Wade to a tomb where there was other sarcophagi, but it was a trap. Red stepped on a mine that blew him up, and Deadpool then stabbed him in the chest as he lay bleeding out on the floor, and he told Red he didn't kill his family. As they shook on a truce, Shikla showed up and punched a hole in Omega Red's chest, but she let him stumble away to heal himself. Much later, a crime syndicate in the Russian mafia led by Komolov set about bringing the original Omega Red back from the dead. Using unholy magics, they did it, but his resurrection would be temporary as the grave continued to call him back. Colossus and Ilyana, Magic's uncle, Anatoly Rasputin, told them Omega Red was back from the dead, so the X-Men Gold Team had their new mission, but it was a trap, and Komalov's men fought the X-Men while Omega Red captured Ilyana Rasputin, Magic, wanting her powers to extend his lease on his new life. And so the X-Men fought a magically powered up Omega Red while Colossus and Nightcrawler went to free Ilyana. Wolverine took Omega Red down and remanded him to the custody of Sickle, led by Arkady's brother Vasily, who put him into a Russian supervillain Supermax and injected him with nanobots to keep him weak. He, of course, managed to escape, so a Weapon X team led by Sabretooth headed to Siberia to stop him. At the prison, Domino and Warpath were the first to run into him and his coils. He forced the other mutants to attack the team while Omega Red dragged Sabretooth away in the snowy tundra outside. That's when Omega Red was attacked by a trio of massive wild Siberian tigers, but the two ended up reaching a bargain. Sabretooth would help free Omega Red from the nanobots, and Omega Red would join the Weapon X team. And so they walked out of the tundra together, along with a new pet, a tiger cub. It turns out that Omega Red's brother had freed him from the prison to kill a general who, a mutant herself, was an obstacle to Russia's anti-mutant policies. The plan was for him to kill her, and then they would fry Omega Red with the nanobots in his blood so there was no trail. So Sabretooth and Lady Deathstrike pulled the nanobots right out of Omega Red's bloodstream. And then as a team, they attacked Vasily and Sickle. And that's how Omega Red came to be part of the Weapon X Force. Omega Red then showed up with Magneto, Angel, and Blob as the Horsemen of Peace, led by X-Man Nate Gray. Jean Grey ended up stopping her son and freed Omega Red and the others from Nate's control. This was around the time that he was working with the X-Tracks for a while. But in a fight with Genesis, he was seemingly killed again. But he wasn't quite dead, of course. He did manage to escape and started working with Dracula, the Lord of Vampires. Dracula told Omega Red to go to Krakoa to steal blood from Wolverine and bring it to him. In exchange, Dracula gave Omega Red the C synthesizer. On Krakoa, Wolverine, Gabby Kinney, a clone of Laura Kinney X-23 named Scout, along with Daken, attacked Omega Red, who told him he did not give his blood to Dracula. And there he remains on Krakoa, yet still an ever-present threat to the Marvel Universe. That's a wrap on this one, my friends. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and you'll be one of the first to know when I upload videos just like this each and every week. I'm Jesse, this is JLS Comics, and I'll see you soon.